Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, 1983. Well, it has an 81% on the tomato meter, certified fresh, 94% audience score, fresh all the way around. Nobody's going to argue that it's rotten. I'm certainly not going to argue that this film is rotten. This is going to be a contrarian episode of Rotten Reviews. I'm going to be taking a look at the movie from 1983 that is, in fact, in my opinion, responsible for the death of Star Wars. It delivered the killing blow to Star Wars. It was not delivered by Walt Disney Company. It was not delivered by the prequel trilogy. It was delivered by the final episode of the original Star Wars trilogy, Return of the Jedi. Why? What is the reason? What is that killing blow that was delivered to Star Wars? Well, it's when the Ewoks came out at the end of Return of the Jedi and they did their little song and dance. Not, well, I should say not a little song and dance, quite a big spectacle of song and dance. And it was quite jarring in 1983 when I saw it in the theater. And it is the actual scene that caused the death of Star Wars. Now, this didn't cause the death of Star Wars right away, but this was where the intent on selling toys overtook the narrative, overtook the story quality, and where George Lucas displayed that it was all about toy sales and everything else be damned. Now, we got the proof, the evidence for that in the Star Wars prequels. They were made for kids, they were made in a way to sell toys, and they were hit and miss, successful or not, depending upon how you want to look at it. But I'll say that that was the proof of what happened earlier. But that actual killing blow that was delivered to Star Wars was delivered at the very end of Return of the Jedi. It wasn't when the Ewoks appeared and started participating in the battles against the stormtroopers. No, it wasn't when the Ewoks first showed up and they took C-3PO and everybody else hostage. No, that's not when the death blow occurred. It is actually that final scene in which the Ewoks sing and dance right after the Death Star explodes above them in the sky. That's when it got over the top stupid and it became all about those toy sales. Now, it took many, many years for the blast wave from this killing blow to finally kill Star Wars off, but it has. And it's not the fault of Disney. Disney was just, a step in the process, as it were. But I'm going to make this a contrary episode of my normal Rotten Review format, and I'm going to be reading off only those reviews, those audience reviews that are 3 stars and less. And I'm going to see if those opinions match up with my own in regards to that Ewoks scene at the end. I think some of them will. And there are also a lot of other 5-star and 4-star reviews to be found here that will criticize that Ewok scene and, in fact, the Ewoks in general. The very existence of the Ewoks is questioned, even in the 5-star reviews, but I'm not going to read all of those. It's certainly more fun to just hit the 3-star and better, 3-star and below, because I think that's going to give me what I want, and I do want to be validated in my beliefs here. So, I'm going to skip through all these 4 and 5 stars, and look at this. We finally have a 2.5-star review, October 27, 2019. This movie has a perfect ending for Star Wars trilogy, but the movie itself is boring in the beginning and in the end's climax where Ewoks fight stormtroopers. An Ewok problem. There is still few things I love. Luke Skywalker is absolute badass in this movie, and his fight against Darth Vader is great. Palpatine works as a super evil Marvel syndrome villain who is evil because of his evilness. He has to be even more evil than Vader, and he really is. I like the ending, but the movie itself is not so good. Well, yeah, this reviewer's seen this in the context of someone in 2019 that's just watched all the MCU movies, culminating with Endgame, and he's applying that standard to Return of the Jedi, so I don't consider that fair. But I noticed we had our first mention of the Ewoks, and I'm going to find a lot more, I think. So let's go through these. We have another 3-star from October 22nd, 2019. In my opinion, this film wasn't as good as the past Star Wars. Well, if you mean it wasn't as good as A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, That's correct. It wasn't. Even in 1983, we knew that this was the weakest of the first three films. In fact, in 1983, we weren't calling them A New Hope. We weren't. We called the '77 film just Star Wars, and we called the next one The Empire Strikes Back, and we called this one just simply Return of the Jedi. That's what we called all of those in 1983. So if you had said that this, Return of the Jedi was the weakest one, if you had told me that in 1983, I would have said, yeah, you're right. The first one was the best one. And my opinion still stands today, of course. But anyway, let's not get too far into that. Let's move down into some more reviews. We are like 3 pages in, and I am not seeing anything but 4-star and 5-star reviews, which is to be expected. But here's one from September 5th, 2019. 2.5 stars. Here is where the cheese starts. It's at least a conclusion to the 2 great movies before it, but even as a kid I knew this was not as good as the first 2. It was the first of many times I left a theater watching this franchise feeling empty. And I wonder why that was. What could it be? It could be those Ewoks at the end. And George Lucas might have agreed as well. In fact, he's changed that ending scene of Return of the Jedi 2 times. He's adjusted it at least 2 times, if not more, before he turned it over to Disney. Maybe Disney will adjust it yet again. But why would George Lucas choose to adjust that final scene? In fact, why would he remove the original Ewoks dancing song that they did at the very end of that film? Why would he change it to something else? He didn't change it for the better, certainly, but he changed it. It's almost like he knew that he went over the top and jumped the shark with those Ewoks, isn't it? And, this reviewer is saying, here's where the cheese starts. Yes, exactly, and that's my point. At the end of Return of the Jedi, that's when it all became about toy sales, and to hell with everything else. And then, many years later, when the prequels came out and it was all George Lucas in control and nobody to put a stop to him or rein him in, we got the answer. Yes, it's all about those precious toy sales to the little kids, unfortunately. So let's move on. Wow. Oh, look at this. A half-star review from August 9th, 2019. Insult to intelligence. Ewoks, Luke plan to save Han. No explanations why others join rebellion. Worst after Empire of First Six. Well, so this is somebody that actually appreciates the prequels. I certainly don't. But they're saying that this is worst. This is even worse than the prequels. No. I will agree that it had some cheapo things done to it that were obvious in 1983 when I watched it in the theater. It relied upon some kind of off-looking background artistry that was supposed to be real background. Oil paintings put into the background through blue screen technology. That didn't look right. I mean, this had been done in the other films, but in the way it looked in this film, it looked very cheap, and you saw that even in the opening scenes of the movie with, Luke Skywalker visiting Jabba's palace. But that's not the fatal flaw. That's not what destroyed Star Wars. It was those Ewoks, and I'm going to find more of that. So let's go on. We're several pages in here. Several pages in, and I'm seeing 4 stars, 5 stars, which, that's in line. This is a 4 and a 5-star movie. But here we have half a star from June 6th of 2019. Luke is far dumber than in previous movies. His plan to save Han should enter into history as worst plan in long history of bad plans. Well, yeah, it's not the best plan, but it wasn't a fatal flaw. In 1983, it wasn't seen that way. So I think this reviewer is kind of applying modern standards from other movies to this one. It was completely fine in 1983, so I disagree. Half a star, June 5th, bad ending to bad trilogy. Yeah, I'm guessing it's those Ewoks. They just say bad ending, right? Half a star, June 1st, Ewoks, Jabba Palace, dumb rebel fleet that should lost. Ewoks right off the bat, right? But I'll agree with this bad English review here also that, yeah, the rebel fleet... that final scene where the rebel fleet is out there. And even in 1983, I kind of got the feeling that the rebel fleet should have been hurt harder. It should have suffered more losses before the end. It kind of shows that, but not really. You don't get a real sense that, The rebel fleet was doomed. Even though the Emperor told you that, and Luke, his reaction was as though the rebel fleet was doomed. You felt the tension, but you didn't see it. It felt to me like we needed to see more of a heavy loss on the rebel fleet. But, that's kind of nitpicking. I'm just going with the Ewoks. That's what actually killed Star Wars, not the other nitpicks. Here's a 3-star from May 14th. Rewatching this movie is very strange. This movie is very goofy and over the top. Yeah, isn't it just like that final Ewok scene? That's where I say this goes over the top. 3 stars, May 4th. Granted, the first act in Jabba's palace goes on for way too long. The effects are back to being dated, and there's too much cute emphasis on the Ewoks. Return of the Jedi is still a decent conclusion to the original Star Wars trilogy, and has one of the best scenes in cinematic history with the final confrontation of Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. But yeah, Ewoks, right? So let's go down, going yet to who knows how many pages we're in. 3 stars, April 17th. Gives the saga an appropriate ending. Humor is at some points bad, and the overall feeling is not as in the movies prior. Yeah, I'm going to largely agree on that. I still say it's a 4-star movie. If I'm forced to give it a rating on the 5-star scale, I say 4 stars, but 3, it's acceptable. I mean, especially if those Ewoks really hurt you. April 13th, 3 stars. Always used to love this movie, but it is kind of boring. It's that opening scene at Jabba's palace. It is a little bit, I don't know, it's, you ended Empire Strikes Back. The way Empire Strikes Back ended, and judging by how many times we watched it before this movie came out, when we saw this in '83, it kind of felt a little slow at the beginning. Even when we got up to the point where, Luke is walking the plank over the Sarlacc pit, even that felt a little lackluster compared to what we had seen at the conclusion of Empire Strikes Back. And so I kind of agree, but, I wouldn't knock it all the way to 3 stars. But here's a 3-star from March 2nd, 2019. Not as good as people like to think, rated too high because of Empire. Well, yeah, it rides off of Empire, certainly. Empire Strikes Back is largely seen out there as the best of all of them. I disagree. I think still the original is the best, but this one is seen as, the one that's just kind of tying up loose ends. But I think it is a 4-star movie. I don't think it deserves to be called rotten in any regard. But, those Ewoks, if you just cut the Ewoks parts out of this on their own, they're totally rotten and stupid. And they belong in something like the Star Wars Holiday Special. They really do. They have better production quality than the Star Wars Holiday Special. But they are right into that vein, and they fit right into it. And, the Star Wars Holiday Specials from 1978, that was kind of a taste of the Ewoks to come, but we had no idea at the time. We had no idea what George Lucas was going to do. And, it's kind of ironic because we were there in 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82. We were playing with our Star Wars toys. We had no idea that by buying those toys and playing with those toys, and, some people bought more toys than others. I had like 2 or 3 action figures, but other people in my neighborhood, the cool kids, the ones that you wanted to play with them all the time, they had their gigantic Darth Vader head collections or multiples with Star Wars action figures, and they had all the cool toys that took 6, 8 D-size batteries, some of them. They had the AT-AT walkers, etc. But little did we know that those toy purchases were what was to actually doom the Star Wars franchise many years in the future, because we were sending the message to George Lucas that, it's all about the toys. And we saw that when the prequels came out, and, we get the infamous statement from George Lucas that it's all about Jar Jar. The key to everything. He's the key to everything. It's all about Jar Jar. Because Jar Jar was supposed to introduce more lines of toys, right? So we're largely responsible for that. December 2nd, 2018, 3 stars. The most overrated Star Wars movie. I don't think so. I think the prequels are overrated. because you get millennials out there that just have this fondness for the prequels, and they just bitterly cling to these prequels no matter how much they say other similar movies are bad for the same reasons. They just won't admit that the prequels are bad movies. And so I say those are overrated. Not this one. This one I think is largely overlooked because it should be known for the killing blow to Star Wars, and yet it's not. I feel like I'm the only one out there saying this. And I'm going to continue to say it. I don't care. I'm going to continue to say it. And I'm going to keep going through these reviews until I find more validation for myself, because I like validation. Otherwise, why would I be sitting in front of the camera if I didn't want validation on some level, right? So anyway, September 17th, 2018, 2 stars, all capitals, so this must be a very important review. The Ewoks suck, and the first half of the movie is boring as hell. The only thing that redeems this movie is the last 30 minutes, which are actually really good, but the first hour and a half suck. Thank you. Thank you for at least acknowledging right off the bat that the Ewoks suck. I congratulate you, sir, on that one. August 27th, 2018, 2.5 stars, worst Star Wars movie. No, come on. I disagree. I would say The Phantom Menace is the worst Star Wars movie, just on a film quality basis, judging it just as a film. If you want to say as a Star Wars film, well, then now we're talking about The Last Jedi. And I should mention that as of the time of me making this video, we are only a handful of days away from the final episode of the Skywalker saga. At least that's what Disney calls it, known as The Rise of Skywalker. I could be wrong. Perhaps The Last Jedi won't be the worst. Perhaps it'll be the second worst Star Wars movie. But as far as worst movies, that's Phantom Menace, I'm afraid. But let's continue. August 3rd, 2018, 2 stars. I'm an original trilogy era person, yet Return of the Jedi was a huge letdown for me. One word: Ewoks. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let's continue on. And we have more 4 and 5 stars, and they do mention Ewoks, but we're going to just stick with the 3-star reviews. Certainly, if there were an easy way for me to pick out the Ewoks reviews, I would just read every one of them, but I'm not going to get that crazy. 2.5 stars, May 27th, 2018. To be honest, this movie was the worst of the original trilogy. The pacing was pretty bad, and one of the only highlights of the whole thing is Darth Vader versus Luke at the end. It's fair, but not 2.5 stars. I still say 4-star movie. 1.5 stars, May 26, 2018. Return of the Jedi is an insult to its 2 predecessors, a prime example of how the need to push for merchandise turns a film into a chaotic mess. Merchandise, otherwise known as toy sales, otherwise known as the killing blow to Star Wars, not the prequels. That's the actual evidence to back it up. No, the killing blow is Return of the Jedi and those Ewoks. So thank you. May 26, 2 stars. May 26, 2018, 2 stars. I don't want to confuse people as to how old these reviews are. I can't stand this film given that Lucas took 5 films and crammed them into this one film, all because he was bored with Star Wars. I'm not, it's not that disjointed. I disagree. No. Completely disagree, but it's interesting that somebody has that take, certainly. 3 stars, May 25th, 2018. The redemption of Anakin Skywalker, classic lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader, but Ewoks besting stormtroopers. Ewoks are just a blatant, cuddly merchandising idea and insulting. Otherwise, a pretty good movie. Thank you very much. Ewoks pretty much put all the rottenness into this puppy, don't they? And it's not a rotten movie, but the Ewoks are certainly rotten. Speaking on the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, I'm not sure if that will hold up, because from the information we have out there, that's rumor at this point, but almost substantiated, and it will be in a few days probably. We're getting the message out there now that the Rise of Skywalker will undo that redemption arc of Anakin Skywalker. It will undo the death of Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. So that may not hold up either, and if so, I'm sure we'll hear about it quite a lot, and probably I'll have to talk about it too. But for now, let's just say the Ewoks are the thing to talk about in Return of the Jedi. Wow, we're so many pages in, I don't even know. We are back in 2018. We're in the summer of 2018, searching for 3-star and lower reviews, and I'm not finding them, which is to be expected, right? I mean, this is quite a film. But we are back, and well, I think we have found something. 1.5 stars, March 18th, 2018. Luke looks like a good Jedi appearance. The actions are a little slow, sometimes look very pathetic. How the Ewoks beat the stormtroopers. Anakin sounds and looks different to the one of episodes 1 to 3. It was just a good movie. Anakin sounds different? Well, you're talking about Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, so not sure what you mean. But here we have, the Ewoks beat the stormtroopers, and yeah, it's like watching toy teddy bears beat up a bunch of trained killers. Like, what if Smokey the Bear dolls were, what if, I don't know, Paddington Bear, Winnie the Pooh dolls were beating up U.S. Marines in some kind of battle. They were just taking out our Marine Expeditionary Forces on a beach somewhere. It's like watching that. You can't excuse it just because it's sci-fi. I mean, there's only so much you can stretch our credibility, right? It's completely stupid. 3 stars, March 9th, 2018. This film has a way too long opening. I agree. A sillier tone than Empire, and a bunch of small little creatures that grind this film to a halt, and is definitely the weakest out of the original trilogy. Having said that, it's still a fun adventure with some cool sequences and fitting character arcs that culminates in a great finale and conclusion to a series that helped this movie appear way better than it actually is. I'll largely agree with all of that. Yeah, the opening's too long. It gets a little bit stretched in opening. The scene where we go to Jabba's palace, no, it's not. It doesn't fit with the end of Empire, with the action we expected. It is very slow to start. The silliness of the Ewoks, and it grinds to a halt. The Ewoks, not just the song and dance at the end, but where the Ewoks take, our characters prisoner, and they're said to be cannibals, although we don't get evidence of that. And, C-3PO says they're cannibals and whatnot, and he becomes their, golden god that tells them to release our characters from their net. It just grinds to a halt. All the action kind of grinds to a halt. And in fact, until we get the speeder chase stuff, the speeder chase through the trees, that's action. But then everything kind of grinds to a halt with those Ewoks. Forget the silliness of it. It's just like it's another long, boring stretch that breaks up action. And it's just like, it wasn't my favorite part. And I remember in 1983 that the speeder bike stuff was kind of good, but that got a little boring too. I mean, after you saw it for the first minute or so, it got kind of old. And then the Ewoks part, I'm just like sitting in my chair with my drink and my popcorn, and I'm like, well, okay. Because it just kind of sucked the life out of stuff. But anyway, February 17, 2018, 2.5 stars. This was one of my least favorited episodes, but that's only because the rest were better. I actually liked this movie. The Ewoks were cute, Han was a badass, Luke was interesting, and that slave Leia scene was hot. I think they put that on the cover to attract boy fans, but that scene made me want to watch this movie over and over. Yeah, it's kind of a period type thing, the sex appeal. In 1983, as a teenage boy, it did kind of look sexy. Not, it wasn't the highlight of anything for me, but it did kind of have sex appeal. But now, as an adult, I can see that, it wasn't really that sexy. It's just, it's aged. That sexiness is kind of aged really poorly. Doesn't appeal to me at all. When I watch that scene with Jabba the Hutt and Princess Leia's a slave girl, I don't get any sex appeal out of that at all, and I'm still a guy, and I'm still a man, and I still, find women attractive, but, it only worked for 13-year-old boys back in the day. It wasn't all that. I'd say it's overrated for that. I mean, all these fanboys now that try to talk it up for, how sexy Princess Leia was, it wasn't all that, please. Princess Leia was a good character for a lot of reasons, but it wasn't her sex appeal at all. In fact, did you know that in Empire Strikes Back, there's a documentary on the making of that. It's been out forever. And, Carrie Fisher says that one of the things they did to her character was they deliberately put some kind of taping around her breasts so that she would have smaller breasts when she fit into her outfits. She wasn't supposed to be a sexually attractive woman in that regard. So look into it and you'll find out that she wasn't even meant to be all that. And I know she appeared in a magazine photo shoot in her Princess Leia outfit later after Return of the Jedi. But that wasn't done by the makers of Star Wars. It wasn't done by Lucas or any of his marketing. That was just Carrie Fisher doing that on her own. But that's not what she was supposed to be in the film, and I don't see it at all, even today. 3 stars, January 27, 2018. My favorite part is Luke fights Darth Vader, and we get to see the Emperor choose your destiny. Great, great, okay, but I'm looking for Ewok references to validate my opinion. I need that validation, need to find it. And I'm going through, I'm scrolling through, and we have a 3-star, January 8th, 2018. I liked it when I was a kid for the Ewoks. Oh, really? You liked it? Okay. Watching it again as an adult, I kind of dragged, and the Ewoks look like they smell bad. I wouldn't want one near me. Okay, so this reviewer is saying that he actually appreciated the Ewoks when he was a kid. Okay, maybe he was like 6 or something, and I was 13. So, okay, maybe. Watching it again as an adult, it kind of dragged, and the Ewoks look like they smell bad and wouldn't want one near me. Yeah, those rag things they wear. Yeah, if you can imagine putting like a rag type outfit, a do-rag on your dog and allowing him to play outside by himself for a few weeks, and then like what he would smell like when he came in the house and what that rag on him would smell like. That's kind of like the Ewoks, yeah. But thanks for mentioning the Ewoks. For a second, you had me disappointed because you were going to tell me that they were just great, but at least you gave me something there to validate that, you know, they are the death of Star Wars. They always were. It's just recent events with the new Disney trilogy have kind of muddied things, but no, this thing was dead already because of toy sales. 3 stars, December 24th, 2017. My least favorite of the Lucas live-action movies. I really only like the Luke storyline. Not a fan of the Ewoks, though I kind of liked them as a kid. Well, there we go. Another review that's similar. They were a small kid at the time, not a teenager like me, so they were not a fan of the Ewoks now, but, you know, in 2017 they're saying they don't like them, but in 1983 they thought they were cool. Okay, because that's making my point, isn't it? They were put in there for little kids to tell their parents that the parents needed them to go out and buy Ewoks toys for them. And that's what this was all about. Even if, you know, on that subject, the toy merchandising is kind of like a chain reaction type thing too in marketing, where I don't remember seeing Ewok toys in toy sections all that much when I was a teenager, because I certainly saw toy section areas as a teenager, for not for Star Wars toys, but for other things like board games and whatnot. And I don't recall Ewoks toys being that big of a deal. But, you know, all the little kids that told their parents that they wanted an Ewok toy, and if the parents had dragged them to the toy section somewhere, or to Toys R Us at the time, and even if there hadn't been many Ewok, in particular Ewok-themed toys, there were a lot of other Star Wars toys there. You know, we kind of forget that back in the day, you would have an entire aisle of a store, or 2 aisles, sometimes more. Toys R Us had certainly more of just solid Star Wars themed toys back in 1983. So even if there weren't too many along the lines of Ewoks, the parents would have picked out something else there, right? I mean, the kids would have come away with something. So the Ewoks, just to get you into the Toys R Us, and then even if you don't buy an Ewoks thing toy, you end up buying something, a speeder or something. So, yeah, it's just the damn toy sales. That's the bomb that went off that killed Star Wars, and that's the reason the prequels were made. Lucas made the prequels just to sell toys, period, full stop. That's where all the billions of dollars came to him from, toy sales. So let's move on. 3 stars, December 24th, 2017. The third act was one of the best, but the rest, Ewoks are okay, but the worst of the trilogy, but it was nowhere near bad. Okay, I'll agree it's nowhere near bad. I say 4 stars, not 3. but they're saying Ewoks are okay. Well, notice how they mention Ewoks. They don't just say the movie's okay, it's not the best, but it's okay, period. No, they have to say the Ewoks are okay. So on some level, they realize that the Ewoks are not okay. Otherwise, why are they having to say they are? You know what I mean? So let's move on. Obviously, it's the Ewoks, and I'm being proven right. So let's go down, let's go down, let's go down. We are so many pages into this thing, I haven't been counting. I could have brought out my little clicker, but I won't. 3 stars, December 20th, 2017. This is where the Star Wars saga started to falter, not with the Phantom Menace. Yes, that's what I've been trying to say. 100% agree. Continuing, the Ewoks were the precursor to Jar Jar Binks. Trying to finish all the story arcs set up in the last 2 movies made the story seem rushed. The implausibility of the rebellion defeating the Empire within a year of being totally crushed was too unrealistic. Still, there are some great action sequences, and the scene at the end with Luke, Vader, and the Emperor was great. The space battle against the Imperial fleet, yes, this is a little bit wordy, but I agree completely. The Ewoks were the precursor to Jar Jar Binks, and the purpose of this was for toy sales. That's it. That's why I say the Ewoks were the final blow. The Ewoks singing and dancing at the end were when Lucas sacrificed believability. He sacrificed story believability, logic in the plot. He sacrificed aesthetics. He even sacrificed the soundtrack at the end of Return of the Jedi and made it silly and cheesy, all for the sake of those Ewoks to sell the toys. That's where he jumped it. That's where he jumped the shark. That's where he tossed the grenade in after pulling the pin. I liken it to actually throwing a bomb into the works. It's like you pull the pin on a hand grenade and you toss it into, somebody's bedroom window, and it doesn't go off right away. Now imagine if a movie goes into slow motion. It often does in the sense of an action movie. Nowadays we get the slow motion shots in an action scene. Well, when it goes into slow motion and then hand grenade is, the pin slowly pops out. The grenade slowly tumbles to the floor. It rolls in slow motion across the room. Yeah, that's the years passing between the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels. And when that grenade actually begins to explode, that's when Phantom Menace is released, the Clone Wars to follow, Revenge of the Sith. That explosion is slowly expanding and it's taking out things in the room. Some of the furniture is burned and already destroyed, but things around the edge of the room are still fine. There's a lamp in the corner of the room that's still untouched by the explosion and looks flawless, and it's been recently dusted and it's fine. And some other paintings on the wall, they're still fine, shiny and new. But as that slow motion explosion expands, it's already happened. It's inevitable. It's fate. It's already the killing blow's already happened. We're just seeing it in slow motion. Now when Disney buys Star Wars and they're thinking, hey, it's billions because of those toy sales, right? And now that explosion has actually reached the paintings on the wall and started to heat the glass on the photos on the wall and cracked that glass, and the paintings are starting to burn, and the ceiling is now breached, and the ceiling is starting to blow off, and the roof is starting to blow off the room. And guess what? Now Disney is holding the bag, and everybody wants to blame Disney, but Lucas tossed that hand grenade into that room, and it took a lot of years to go off. But he had already demonstrated at the end of Return of the Jedi, that he was willing to blow it all up for toy sales. And he said in his own interview that's been put out on 1,000 YouTube channels at one point or another that, the prequels, they were made for kids. It's a movie about space wizards for kids. And that's because it's designed to sell toys. And the end of Return of the Jedi is where he revealed all this, where he finally said, screw it, that's where the money is. And the prequels, that was just proving it. That was just that explosion further expanding. And it's not Disney's fault. They bought it. Lucas certainly probably marketed it to them to sell it to them for the billions that would be made on toy sales, not just from whatever meager profits would come in at the box office. It was about toy sales, a chain reaction of toy sales that slowly pays you over time, pays you billions. But let's continue on. I think I'm making my point. I've made it before in a video, one of the first videos on my channel. But here we have one from December 18, 2017, half a star. Return of the Jedi caps off a lackluster bunch of movies. There are 3 shuttle landings, the end of Empire Strikes Back and intro to Return of the Jedi. One of them was for a decrepit, cackling Halloween prop. Okay, so they're criticizing the way the shuttles looked when they landed against the CGI backdrops. Okay. It's an actual valid criticism. You can see the drop in quality on the blue screen technology and whatnot. Why there's this drop, I don't know. Budget stuff going on, I just don't know. Time constraints, again, I don't know. But I'll continue. Are they just lazy? They blew up a space slug among other reject props from Sesame Street just prior, so that was disgusting. Should have cut the carbonite scene in Empire Strikes Back and cut the Tatooine scenes entirely. They didn't add to the glossily thin plot. Watching a Rogue One sequence as filler would have been preferable. So they're just like, they completely pan the film because they're saying there's just a huge drop in quality between Empire Strikes Back and this. And yeah, I'll agree, there's a noticeable drop, but it's not huge enough to make this sink down that low. No, this is still a 4-star film. Again, no mention of the Ewoks. This person is just hating so much other stuff with it that they probably didn't get to the Ewoks yet, so we'll move on. Oh, wow, we're still going here. We're still going. We have 3.5 stars. Not quite, you know, low enough for me, but here's a 3-star, December 15th, 2017. Great beginning, but Ewoks destroyed whole movie. Thank you. Thank you for that, my friend. Let's move on. That's, you know, I got that out of one page, certainly. Let's continue down. We have 3.5, not quite there. Come on, come on. We're moving down. We are moving down. What do we have? What do we have? 2 stars. August 12th, 2017. Not a big fan of this movie at all, as I do feel the action was not really good quality and was stretched out over more than an hour of film. I thought the ending was predictable, the acting and dialogue was cheesy, and compared to the previous 2 installments in the franchise, a bit of a shame. I feel like this is an overrated film. I'm sorry, I do. Well, I'll agree that, you know, it didn't move. The pacing was too slow at the beginning. The ending was predictable, but it had to be. The trailer showed you another Death Star. You knew how it had to end. If your only flaw with this is that it's just predictable and that there's another Death Star, okay, but that doesn't reduce it to 2 stars. I still say 4-star. The story is still solid. No mention of Ewoks, by the way. July 20th, 2017, 3 stars. A very good movie, interesting and fun, but the ending is weak and the beginning is the best part. Most people remember this movie for Leia in her metal slave bikini, not for much else. That's not true. I remember this mostly for the Ewoks. I'm afraid it's the Ewoks. So let's move on. I rarely think about Leia. It's all about the Ewoks. And that's what George Lucas intended. He wanted me to think all about those Ewoks. And it was a mission accomplished in that regard. I'm saying, yes, George Lucas destroyed Star Wars, but it was deliberate and he succeeded. Half a star, June 26, 2017. Star Wars Return of the Jedi, dumber and slower than the rest of the original predecessors. Star Wars The Return of the Jedi is a weak and disappointing end to the original series. Yes, but why don't you bring up the Ewoks? I'm looking for some Ewok action. Come on now. Don't just tell me it's bad and then don't provide reasoning. You know, on something, you know, as well loved as this, you really have to provide a little more than just, you know, I didn't appreciate it and it was the weakest one. You have to give me a little more than that. Otherwise, no one's going to take you seriously. I'm not even going to take a 5-star review seriously unless you can back it up a little, because otherwise it's just hype, right? Hype isn't worth anything. January 2nd, 2017, 3 stars. It's a good movie, but it feels a little too cheery compared to the rest of the original films. There's also the elephant in the room. Duping a tribe of teddy bears into thinking you're angry deities is somehow a heartwarming experience. Yeah, it's those damn teddy bears, again, also known as Ewoks. Why didn't George Lucas just call them teddy bears? Is the word teddy bear trademarked for toy sales? Perhaps it is, I don't know. But anyway, 3 stars, December 2016. I liked this film slightly more than the first two I have seen, but only slightly. I am getting into the more modern films, and I have been told that those are the most impressive ones we shall see. Well, good luck with all that. In a few days, you're going to find out. And I just say good luck because it's not looking good so far. No mention of Ewoks here. Ewoks are coming back in Rise of Skywalker, by the way. Ewoks are coming back in a few days, at least in one scene that we know of. So get ready for more Ewoks. Now, is that going to be a big toy sale thing? Are we going to see Ewoks appear in the stores for the first time in 2-3 decades? I don't know. I hope not, though. They'll just remind me that George Lucas pulled the pin on this grenade many, many years ago. 1 star, December 2016. I've watched every Star Wars film hundreds of times, and though it deserves a higher rating than what I'm giving it, the fact is it definitely doesn't deserve as high a ranking as the trendy folks that love teddy bears and have deluded themselves into thinking that these waddling creatures could accomplish this much while looking past the many plot holes and somewhat poor acting. I mean, the movie only has about 15 minutes of good scenes, and they have seen fit to give it a 4 out of 5. What a joke. So, yeah, they're saying that this is overrated by people that love teddy bears. They have a point there, but this is still a 4-star movie. The story arc is completed. The production value is there. But thank you very much for mentioning Ewoks. They are the fatal flaw in Star Wars. They are the thing that killed Star Wars. It just took a lot of years for the bomb to go off. But let's move on. December 2016, 3 stars. Honestly, this is the worst of the good Star Wars movies. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. The plot is still excellent. The characters are great, especially Skywalker, and the entire Tatooine sequence is legendary. However, once the Ewoks show up, this movie goes a little downhill. It gets a little boring and disappointing. Despite this, it is still a very good movie that deserves a watch. Oh, and I do prefer The Phantom Menace to this. Ouch, that hurts. I felt a disturbance in the pit of my stomach. I'm sorry, I have to disagree. The Phantom Menace is the epitome of bad, toy sales and all. Let's not get into that. But in any case, thank you for mentioning the Ewoks. When the Ewoks showed up, things were getting boring. But the Ewoks showing up didn't kill this, right? It was when the Ewoks broke into the song and dance at the end that finally it happened. If the Ewoks had just shown up and did everything else and helped in the final battle, with bringing down the Death Star shield generator, it would have been okay. It wouldn't have been a bomb that went off or anything. It wouldn't have been the fatal blow to Star Wars. That probably still would have occurred in The Phantom Menace later. But no, it was when the Ewoks actually started singing their dub-dub song or whatever at the end. That was the fatal blow. 2 stars, December 2016. The Ewoks ruined this movie. Thank you. Thank you for that comment. We have 5 stars, 4 stars. We have where was it? We have a 3-star, December 2016. Although the effects are outstanding, the story seems like it could be reduced to an hour-long movie. The Jabba the Hutt and the Ewok parts are boring and don't add anything to the plot. The entire plot leads up to yet another space battle and lightsaber fight. The new Death Star is blown up due to some weakness. Oh, really? And the stormtroopers are taken to a new low, being beat by a bunch of tiny, fuzzy creatures. In all, the movie does not compare to the spectacular achievements of the 2 previous. Yeah, I'll agree with that. The Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine scenes, not necessary. You could have had Han Solo rescued from the carbonite in a lot of different ways that would have been more exciting. Yeah, the Death Star's blown up yet again, not exactly in the same fashion, but yes. Yeah, I largely agree with this, but none of that's the fatal blow to Star Wars. The fatal blow was not even the Ewoks fighting the stormtroopers, but the fatal blow was the Ewoks dancing at the end. So I'm going to disagree anyway. but thanks for mentioning Ewoks. Let's move down. We're going through. 3 stars. August 7th, 2016. It's a good finally, however, it's bogged down by the Ewoks and some awful scenes. Still worth a watch, though. Ewoks, thank you very much. I say 4 stars, but thanks for mentioning on the Ewoks. 3 stars, July 28th, 2016. An odd tonal shift from episodes 4 and 5 to 6 does not stop this film from being a satisfying conclusion to the Star Wars saga. Certainly not on par with A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back, though. But you should have mentioned the Ewoks. Come on now. Give us a little bit of something there. 3 stars, July 19th, 2016. During the first half, it's obvious that the creators have tried really hard to deliver the ugliest film of all times, and they have succeeded. On top of that, the acting remains fairly bad. Harrison Ford, the only possible exception. The effects totally unconvincing in the 21st century, and the storytelling rather problematic. The film is definitely salvaged by the pretty good prolonged battle at the Death Star and Luke's confrontation with Darth Vader. Overall, above par, but too far from great. I'll largely agree with that. It could have had better dialogue, and it just doesn't live up to the other two. But why didn't you mention the Ewoks? Come on now. That's the fatal flaw here. If you had taken the Ewoks out of this thing, I could have probably said it was perfect. I wouldn't have even nitpicked it. But then again, George Lucas, he simply would have done this thing in The Phantom Menace. It was about the toy sales. So I'm going to move on, searching for more validation. 3 stars, February 27th, 2016. Inferior to the previous 2 installments in the Star Wars franchise. Spends too much time on the Ewoks. Suffers from a surprising downgrade in the FX department, and has a laundry list of conveniences for its protagonists. Despite its flaws, Return of the Jedi nails the Luke Vader conclusion and puts a nice bow on the original trilogy. Yeah, nobody argues. I mean, it's that conclusion of the story arc between Luke and his father. That's what makes this the outstanding end of the first 3 movies. If you took that away and you just had the Ewoks and whatnot in there, oh wow, this would have been clearly rotten. But the actual conclusion of the story between Luke and his dad and the redemption of Darth Vader actually makes the Ewoks bearable. And it did. In 1983, I was able to overlook the Ewoks. No matter how bad they made me feel while I was sitting there at the end, I still came away feeling good because of the overall story arc was concluded properly. But yeah, in the back of my mind, those Ewoks. 3 stars, February 20th, 2016. Rewatch in 2016. Starts off with a lot of fan service. Carrie Fisher looks stunning. The plot borrows heavily from the last 2 movies for the weakest adventure yet. Not as much fun or entertaining. Decent watch, but with time has lost its punch. Yeah, they bring up one thing on this review. As this thing ages, it's going to be seen worse. I think it's going to take many years. Rotten Tomatoes certainly won't be around by the time this becomes, a not-so-good film. But I think in another generation of viewers, this film will be seen as pretty bad, particularly compared to the first one, because I've seen this thing drop in stature in just the last 20 years. And it's dropping in stature, I would say, at a faster rate than it had before. So give it one more generation and probably this movie will be seen as almost rotten. But we're not there yet. I still say, for people my age, 4 stars, with caveats on the Ewoks. 3 stars, January 26, 2016. Return of the Jedi, originally called Revenge of the Jedi, is a classic film of the original Star Wars trilogy. This film did well with critics and fans, even though it didn't have the anticipated success as A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back. It's still a very good movie, and much loved by all Star Wars fans. You still will fall in love with this film, just like the other 2, and love the ending to a great trilogy. Well, yes, they bring up a couple of good points. This was the perfect end to the trilogy. It's not a perfect film, but it was the perfect conclusion. And yes, it wasn't as financially successful as the other 2. In fact, there's some accounting weird stuff going on where it was actually stated several times in the press that this movie actually didn't turn a profit, or the profit was very negligible. I don't know what's going on with that, but that's not the impression I have nowadays. I'm sure this did make a profit, and certainly with toy sales, right? There was a profit to be had because Lucas owned this and he owned all the toy sale revenue. So regardless, even if this film had taken an actual loss on paper, it still turned a profit in the end for Lucas, definitely. 3 stars, January 25th, 2016. Not as good as its predecessors, however, it still has great character moments. Some of cough Ewoks make the film drag. Thank you for mentioning Ewoks. They don't just make the film drag. They're the fatal flaw in Star Wars. They are what killed Star Wars. Those Ewoks in the final scene, dancing and singing. So much so that George Lucas came back years later and tried to change it all up at the end, at least one time, and made it worse, actually. But 3 stars, January 15th, 2016. Return of the Jedi may be the worst of the three, but it's worth it. I'll agree with that. 2.5 stars, January 2016. This may be technically the best of the original trilogy, but it already possesses some annoying parts which make it overall the weakest part. If I ever have to stand these teddy bear-like Ewoks again, or this sorry bunch of hut scum I'll need to retch, I still like the universe, but in the meantime it's nicer to experience it in computer games, because they know how to transport the dark atmosphere of the Imperium. Here's somebody saying they hope the Ewoks don't come back. Well, I've got some bad news. The Ewoks, they are making an appearance in, from what I can tell, in a few days from now. They will make another appearance after all these years in Rise of the Skywalker. Let's hope it's a very short appearance and they're just shown, okay, and they don't start singing and dancing. But if that happens, it'll certainly be something to complain about, won't it? And the YouTubers out there that like to feed upon, the shocking bad parts of movies, they'll have quite a lot of videos to make about it if those Ewoks start dancing again. 3 stars, December 2015. Despite being beautifully filmed and technically magnificent, George Lucas he got too George Lucasy on this one. Stupid, annoyingly childish jokes, plus the Ewoks in general almost ruined this film for me. In my mind, this film is the beginning of the Star Wars slump that is miraculously salvaged with Revenge of the Sith. This movie didn't have to be mediocre. There are so many reasons to love it, and in many ways it is a fitting conclusion to an incredibly influential film saga. Well, I largely agree with that, but I wouldn't say it's George Lucasy. I think you're trying to be too kind to him. It's toy sales. Let's just straight up call it what it is. This is flat out the quest for greed, the quest for billions on toy sales, and to hell with the story, to hell with the believability, to hell with what the fans think. You just want to sell toys. Maybe you could say in your defense, as George Lucas, that the giant giraffe from Toys R Us had taken your family hostage and he had you held against your will to do the prequels and to do this at the end of Return of the Jedi for those toy sales. But I don't believe that. I think it was just greed, in my opinion, that led to the downfall of Star Wars. And that wasn't Disney. That wasn't Disney. That was Lucas. That was George Lucas with his beloved Ewoks. 3 stars, December 26, 2015. Return of the Jedi, the end has arrived, and I had to skip one big as it's just full of characters singing and dancing, which bored me to death. Like others, it's pretty boring and feels like a movie of two halves. One half saving Han Solo and his corny acting and stupid lines. The other half, the only interesting part of the whole franchise, Luke and Anakin. The final scenes between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor are excellent, but these scenes are just too few. So they're not only saying that the Ewoks were bad, the singing and dancing Ewoks, but they're also mentioning the scene in which Han Solo is saved from carbonite. You know what? That is a little bit bad. That is a little bit hokey and cheesy, that scene. Han Solo is still blind at the time from being freshly out of the carbonite. I don't know, that felt a little off to me too as a 13-year-old, but not enough to consider that bad, but it did feel a little bit off. But the Ewoks, the Ewoks just like make the rest of it quite forgivable. 3 stars, December 24th, 2015. Being the result of George Lucas choosing to drop the serious sci-fi intense action and tragedy elements from New Hope and Empire Strikes Back in favor of introducing a Sesame Street-like story about the main cast meeting up with furry or slimy aliens, such as the seriously unlikable Jabba the Hutt and the Ewoks, who are all just annoying or troublesome. Return of the Jedi lacks the same golden intelligence of New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, but it does at least finish away the story. Yeah, it finishes the story properly, and they're not only criticizing Ewoks, they're criticizing in this review Jabba the Hutt. I don't think that was that bad. Jabba the Hutt was interesting. It was different. It was something new at the time. No, I'm going to disagree and say that the only reason you're nitpicking Jabba the Hutt is because the Ewoks were there. Just blame the Ewoks. Don't try to drag everybody else in with the Ewoks. That's not really fair. This is a 4-star movie. 2 stars, December 23rd, 2015. So by the end of this trilogy, Han Solo has sort of turned into a boring wuss, while Luke has turned badass. It must have been the Ewoks, as Luke got away from them as fast as he could, and those scenes with Vader, the Emperor, and Luke. How many times can the Emperor tell Luke his friends have failed and will die? How many times can the word destiny be uttered? Who was the scriptwriter for this one? Only redeeming part was the fight scene in the desert, though Boba Fett's death was sort of lackluster. Well, you know, Boba Fett's death into the Sarlacc pit looked kind of fake and cheesy. It was really bad. It was really cheap, that whole scene around the floating, Jabba's floating ship or skiff or whatever it is on the deserts of Tatooine. It was kind of cheap looking, and it looked cheap to me as a 13-year-old sitting in this theater watching it. I'll agree with that. Boba Fett's death looked really fake. It was all practical effect, him dropping into a fake Sarlacc thing. That creature looked fake, though. Destiny was uttered a lot. Yeah, it's kind of over the top like that. It's going to be one of those things that ages really poorly. Kind of like you watch an old movie from the 50s and 60s that at the time was very dramatic and believable and tense, and then you watch it today and, as a much younger generation, you just don't get it and it seems cheesy and the dialogue doesn't seem right to you, even though at the time the movie was made, it was fine by the audience of that time. I think a lot of this Return of the Jedi will be the first film to age poorly with the preceding generations, as the dialogue is seen in a worse way and whatnot. And it will probably be the original 1977 film Star Wars, known as A New Hope to the younger generations, that will hold up the best. And that one will still be considered a classic as Return of the Jedi and eventually Empire Strikes Back eventually fade into more obscurity. But that's way down the line. We're talking decades down the line, not anytime soon. This is still today deserving of being a 4-star film. Let's see what we have. 3 stars, December 21st, 2015. While not as visually exciting as the two that came before it, Return of the Jedi has some great scenes and duels, and Leia is practically naked, so there's that. She's not naked. If you can call being in a bikini, actually she's in a little bit more than a bikini, as being naked, please. Hardly. Even by those standards in 83, no, that wasn't even close to being naked. You could see more than that on any beach in the summer in 1983, and certainly since. So please, don't even go there. Let's see, we have some 3.5s, but nothing worth commenting on. We're going to go with this 3-star, December 16th, 2015. Return of the Jedi is an exciting and satisfying end to the original Star Wars trilogy, though not quite matching the intensity and power of The Empire Strikes Back. The story of Luke and Vader, the rebellion, and the Empire comes to an exciting head in this final film, with excellent moments of conflict and drama. Luke's internal conflict of battling the dark side and his cries for his father Vader to listen to the good in him adds a compelling thematic and human element to this final installment. And I'm so disappointed you didn't get to the Ewoks. You went all into that wordy description, and it was okay, but you should have led with the Ewoks. Always lead with the Ewoks, if you want my advice. Let's go through some more, just a little tidbit of some more. 3 stars, December 13th, 2015. Long, slow, and boring. It drags on and on, but still pretty good. No mention of Ewoks. Okay. Um, let's see. No Ewoks. Half a star, November 25th, 2015. Respects Lucas' original vision far more than its predecessor, segmented, aesthetically precise, and more philosophically diverse. The film's visual allure is refreshingly too much wordiness here. Let's just move on. There's nothing in that description that suggests half a star, so I'm not going to go there. This is a 4-star movie. 1 star, November 6, 2015. I could write a whole book on movies I think are overrated. I always cringe when I see an immature movie such as Return of the Jedi get audience acclaim. I mean, seriously, Ewoks? I hate those things. The direction is indifferent, the script is scattershot, the characters are lifeless with no emotion, the story sucks because it's so freaking predictable. Don't let anyone tell you that this is a classic. It's just a crowd pleaser at the end of the day. Well, thank you for mentioning the Ewoks. But I don't think it's as overrated in other ways as you think it is. 1 star, really? Sorry, man. But the Ewoks just bring it down to the 4-star level. 3 stars, October 27th, 2015. Decent movie. Overall, it was a great villain, aka Emperor Palpatine, played by a great actor. The only big problem I had was the Ewoks. I did not like the Ewoks. Thank you. You know, I should probably leave it at that, but I'll read this final one that's actually a 4-star review, October 20th, 2015. Those Ewoks know how to throw a party. That's a very good quote to leave this one on. Those Ewoks sure know how to throw a party. 81% on the tomato meter, 94% on the audience score. Certainly fresh. I agree. It's fantastic. It's a 4-star movie, but it is the actual killing blow to Star Wars. The final scene of Return of the Jedi is why Star Wars died, and it's all on George Lucas, in my opinion. And I'm going to see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.